This looks like a startup story. It may really be a wage story. SpaceX just agreed to buy Anysphere, the company behind Cursor, in a deal with an implied equity value of $60 billion. The filing says the deal is expected to close in the third quarter, and it's not a small side bet. It's one of the clearest signals yet that the AI boom isn't only about chatbots. It's about buying tools that can change the price of work. The wealth side is easy to see. The Guardian reported SpaceX shares were about 60% above the IPO price. The company briefly rose as high as $2.97 trillion in market value, and the stock jumped at the open after the Cursor news. That's the rocket chart. But under the rocket is a work badge. And the badge is asking the question most people hear when AI billionaires are made cool for them. What does it do to my job? To make $60 billion feel less like space money, translated into labor. Using Bureau of Labor Statistics median pay, $60 billion equals roughly 451,000 software developer annual wages. Using the median pay across all occupations, it's about 1.21 million worker years. That doesn't mean those wages vanished. It doesn't mean this deal laid off those people. It means the market is putting an enormous price on software that may make skilled work cheaper, faster, or easier to reorganize. So here's the open loop for this video. We're going to follow the same AI dollar twice. First as paper wealth for owners, then as labor leverage over workers. At every step, we'll come back to the same question: who keeps the lift? That's why this story matters beyond Silicon Valley. A Pew survey reported by the Washington Post found that 52% of employed Americans were worried about AI in future workplaces. 36% felt hopeful. 29% felt excited. Only 6% expected AI to create more job opportunities for them. That's the emotional split. People can be curious about the technology and still hear it as a threat to their monthly life. And the technology isn't sitting in the future anymore. Gallup data reported by Tom's Hardware said half of US employees now use AI at work in some form. Daily or near weekly use hit 28%. So this isn't just a founder story. It's moving into normal offices, teams, and task lists. Now narrow the lens. Cursor is a coding tool, so the best first test is software work. The 2025 Stack Overflow Developer Survey found that 84% of developers use or plan to use AI tools. Among professional developers, 51% use them every day, but trust has not caught up. 46% said they distrust the accuracy of AI output, compared with 33% who trust it. Only 3% said they highly trust it. That's the first reveal. AI is already inside the work. But it's not magic. It's supervised labor. Look at where developers use it. Stack Overflow found partial AI use was highest for writing code, debugging, learning a codebase, and testing. In other words, it's strongest around drafts, fixes, explanations, and first passes. That's not the whole job, but it's a lot of the latter. This is where Marcus enters the story. Marcus is an early career developer. He's not a billionaire founder. He's not trying to predict the future of civilization. He's trying to become useful at work. His value used to grow through ordinary tasks. Fix this bug, write this test, explain this code, clean up this ticket. Not glamorous. Necessary. If an AI tool makes those tasks faster, that can help Marcus. But it can also change the question his company asks. Instead of, how many junior people do we need to do this work? The question becomes, how much of this work can one senior person do with the tool? There's real evidence for the upside. In a controlled GitHub Copilot experiment, developers using the tool completed a simple coding task 55.8% faster than the control group. That's not a tiny improvement. If a task took 10 hours, a gain like that points towards something closer to 4.5 hours saved in that setting. For a worker, that can feel amazing. For a company, it can look like cheaper output. But the evidence isn't one-way hype. A 2025 study of experienced open-source developers found that when they were allowed to use early 2025 AI tools, completion time increased by 19% across 16 developers and 246 tasks, even though the developers expected to move faster. So the honest story isn't AI makes all developers faster. The honest story is sharper. AI can make some work faster, some work messier, and some work require more checking than people expected. That matters for wages because wages aren't paid for vibes. They're paid in a negotiation over value. If the tool makes your output more valuable and you keep the credit, that can help you. If the tool makes your task look cheaper and the company keeps the credit, that can hurt you. That's the catch inside the AI billionaire story. The tool doesn't have to replace the job to change the price of the task. This is the midpoint turn. The scary version of the AI story says a robot takes your job. The more practical version is quieter. A company buys a tool that gives it another option, and in any negotiation, options matter. The Anthropic Economic Index looked at more than 4 million Claude conversations. Software development and writing made up nearly half of usage. The researchers split usage into 57% augmentation and 43% automation. That split is the whole story in one chart. Sometimes AI helps the worker, sometimes it does the task, and sometimes the line between those two is exactly where the wage pressure lives. Go back to Marcus. If AI helps him finish a task faster, who keeps that lift? Maybe Marcus becomes more productive and gets promoted. Good. Maybe his team ships more with the same people. Also good, if the value is shared. Or maybe the company decides it can keep the same output with fewer entry-level workers next year. Same tool, different owner, different outcome. That's why the entry-level evidence matters. PwC analysis reported by Investopedia and Business Insider found that AI-exposed US entry-level roles were 7 times more likely to demand senior skills. The same reporting said seniorized roles grew 35% from 2019 to 2025, while comparable non-seniorized roles fell 10%. Don't overread that. It doesn't prove every junior job is disappearing, but it does show the latter may be changing. The first rung can start asking for second rung experience. For Marcus, that's the worker side catch. The tasks that used to train him are also the tasks easiest to compress. If those tasks are automated, bundled, or moved upward to someone using a tool, the company may still get the output. But Marcus loses the practice path. And that's where a tech valuation becomes a money story. Some research on generative AI and job postings points in the same direction. It finds that firms can adjust not only by hiring fewer people, but by redesigning roles and reallocating hiring across jobs. Visually, this isn't one big trapdoor, it's a set of moving tiles. That's important because layoffs are easy to count. Quiet redesign is harder to notice. A job posting can keep the same title while the actual job changes. A junior role can start expecting senior judgment. A support role can ask for AI workflow skill. A manager can treat old output as the new baseline. Nobody has to say your wage is lower because of AI. The pressure can arrive as, this is just what the job is now. The broader evidence is mixed but useful. One review of AI and jobs summarized productivity gains of roughly 20 to 60% in controlled experiments and 15 to 30% in field experiments, while also noting that complex tasks are less predictable and there's some evidence of weaker demand for novice work. That's not doom, it's a warning label. Productivity gains are real. But they don't automatically become worker gains. Think of it as a value capture waterfall. First, the tool improves output. Second, somebody owns the tool. Third, the task gets repriced. Fourth, the worker has to prove why their judgment, context, reliability, and responsibility are still scarce. The waterfall is where the money story lives, not in the code by itself, in who captures the value after the code gets easier to produce. Put that into a simple example. Say Marcus has a task that used to take 10 hours. With the tool, maybe the first draft takes 6. That 4-hour difference can go several places. It can become time for Marcus to learn harder work. It can become more output from the same team. It can become a lower price for customers. It can become a wider margin for the company. Or it can become the reason the next junior opening never appears. That's why productivity isn't the same as a raise. Productivity is the bigger pie. Wages are the argument over the slice. And this is also why the owner of the tool matters. If Marcus owns the skill and uses AI as leverage, he can walk into a review and say, I'm producing more, handling harder work, and catching more mistakes. That's a worker strength story. But if the company owns the workflow, sets the tool, measures the output, and treats the old work as the new minimum, Marcus may not get a stronger case. He may just get a higher bar. The same 4 hours can feel like freedom from one side of the table and pressure from the other. There's even evidence that AI can change perceived credit. In a study across 10 experiments with 3,346 participants, people reduced compensation for workers who used AI, linked to lower perceived credit for the work. That doesn't mean employers have already cut pay by that amount. It means the social story around the work can change. If people think the tool did the valuable part, the worker may have to fight harder to be seen as the source of value. That's a dangerous shift because wages are partly about proof. Can you prove your work is scarce? Can you prove your judgment matters? Can you prove the result depends on you, not just the software sitting next to you? For a founder or investor, a $60 billion tool says, this software can capture a lot of value. For Marcus, the question is, does it make me more valuable, or does it make my piece of the work easier to price down? And even the productivity story has friction. Business Insider reported on Glean research showing white-collar workers spent 6.4 hours a week checking and managing AI output. 75% said AI made them more productive, but only 13% said organization performance improved significantly. That sounds familiar if you have used these tools. They can save time. They can also create a new job checking the thing that was supposed to save you time. For Marcus, that means the useful question isn't, did AI help? Sometimes yes. The useful question is, after the review, correction, responsibility, and risk, who gets credit for the final output? That's the third callback. The rocket chart rises. The badge asks, who keeps the lift? So here's the practical framework for reading the next AI wealth headline. First, ask who owns the tool. If the worker owns the skill and the tool helps them produce more, that can strengthen the worker. If the company owns the tool and uses it to standardize the work, that can strengthen the company. Second, ask which tasks it absorbs. If it absorbs annoying busy work, great. If it absorbs the tasks that train beginners, the latter gets weaker. Third, ask how scarce the worker remains. The more the job depends on judgment, trust, context, accountability, and taste, the harder it's to price the worker like a replaceable input. Fourth, ask where the savings go. Do they become higher wages, lower prices, bigger margins, fewer openings, or faster output targets? Run Marcus through the framework. Who owns the tool? His company pays for it and decides how it's measured. Which task does it absorb? The first draft, the easy fix, the explanation, the test. How scarce is Marcus? That depends on whether he can do the part the tool can't: safely own judgment, responsibility, context, and trust. Where do the savings go? That's the open question. It might become a raise, it might become a smaller team, it might become more work in the same week. That's the AI wage test. Not will AI take my job? That question is too big and too blurry. The better question is, what part of my work is becoming cheaper, and am I getting more leverage or less because of it? That matters because most workers can't negotiate with an abstract revolution. They negotiate with a manager, a job description, a deadline, and a number on a paycheck. So the useful move is to shrink the AI story down to one task at a time. Which task got cheaper? Who noticed? Who got the credit? Who got the next raise, the next opening, or the next workload target? That's how you bring $60 billion back down to earth. The number isn't here to impress you. It's here to show what the market thinks this kind of tool might be worth. And if a tool is worth that much, the next question is simple. What work does it make cheaper, and who gets paid for the difference? This is the checklist: ownership, task exposure, scarcity, savings. Those four boxes tell you more than the headline does. They don't predict the future perfectly, but they keep you from getting trapped between two bad stories. AI is just rich guy news, or AI means everybody is doomed. The truth is more useful. AI wealth headlines are labor headlines when the tool being valued can change the price of work. That's the working man catch inside the rocket chart. The AI billionaire story isn't only about somebody else getting rich. It's about whether the tool they own makes your work easier, cheaper, or easier to replace. That doesn't mean panic. It means pay attention to the task, not the headline. If this helped make the AI boom feel less blurry, subscribe. The next time a money story sounds like rich guy news, we'll take it apart the same way. One number, one mechanism, one household consequence at a time. Thanks.